to have all of you join us today as we close our fall ELO-P Academy. We're excited to engage some really awesome guests today, different school leaders who will be connecting with us on promising practices and ways that they have been able to support expanded learning opportunity programs in their communities. And so a few messages before we get started. My name is Melissa Perez. I work with the California After School Network, and I am happy to be here with you all. Friendly reminder, we will be recording this session, and so we will start recording now. Today's agenda, we are focusing on supporting LEA leaders and also community partners that were invited by their local educational agency. We will also offer breakout spaces where folks will be able to connect on a specific topic with different folks from our system of support. And so our Zoom meeting will end at noon today. And so we hope you stick around and engage in conversation with folks throughout the state. If you are engaging in social media, we just ask that you use our hashtag, hashtag CAELO program. And we look forward to connecting with you on social media. If folks are interested, we also invite you to attend our fall ELO-P office hours. We will drop a link in the chat where you can register for each session, or you can scan the QR code here. And ways to stay connected with the California After School Network. You can meet our CAN team, you can explore latest resources. We'll also drop these links in the chat. And also connecting with our SSEL, our System of Support for Expanded Learning. All right, so we have we're hoping to have a rich conversation with such amazing leaders today. And so I am excited to announce that we will have Hedy Chang from Attendance Works, Elisa Ramirez from Calexico Unified School District, Dr. Wesley Smith from Newport-Mesa Unified School District, our own Tiffany Gipson from the California After School Network, and Michael Funk from the Expanded Learning Division at the California Department of Education. So I believe I'll be passing it off to Tiffany. Thanks. Have a great time, everyone.
Thank you, Melissa. So again, folks, welcome. Day 4. If you've been with us, you know that we have really had a great series of conversations about how to really hold and support our young people using expanded learning, and today is no exception. I'm going to start with a little bit of something to kind of ground us, and we're sharing some things today because we want this to feel more like a conversation. It's structured a little differently than how we've done some of the other days, but really and truly the intent is for you to get the feel of expanded learning and to look at it not just a set of services at a certain time, but more of a strategy to help our schools. So saying that, here's what we believe. Every child, youth, and the adults that live, love, and work with them deserve just and affirming spaces and opportunities that enrich, empower, enlighten, educate, and elevate them. We know that learning happens in every context, and young people are assets in supporting their own learning and co-creating the solutions to the issues and challenges they face. For us, expanded learning and out-of-school time spaces can be cultivated by anchoring in some common and core beliefs and shared mindsets. We are rooted in love, and love is shown in our actions and our words. We are asset anchored and driven. We are aspirational in our mindsets, words, and actions, and we are connected by our differences because that is what gives us strength and creates our collective. The appreciation of every culture, language, and lived experience is what we leverage to grow and nurture our collective spaces. We make decisions based on elevating the intrinsic gifts, talents, and wisdom of those closest to the problems we work collaboratively to solve. And we learn by doing, and we grow by reflecting on that learning. This is something that we started to kind of share out in places, because what we realized is expanded learning is a mindset. It is asset-based. It is how do we anchor ourselves in the strengths of not only our young people we serve, but the people that serve them. And how do we really use that to create the kind of learning opportunities that we know our young people deserve. So with me saying all of that, I want to welcome Michael into the conversation, and he's going to give some space to introduce our friends in this work. And we're going to get started with our conversation today. Michael.
Thank you, Tiffany. I love every time you give that pedagogical methodology statement, because it's so rich and from the heart. And Peter, thank you so much for that grounding. That's first time I've heard the bag approach. So thank you. What a beautiful way to start the day. And we've already given you a slide with everyone that's here, but welcome specifically or especially to Hedy Chang, who I've known for many, many, many years from working together in the Bay Area in California with attendance works, and she'll be talking to us in just a few moments. But we also have Elisa Ramirez and Wes Smith. Elisa from Calexico, where I've had the opportunity to be in that town and in that district and visit it firsthand, and also Wes Smith from Newport-Mesa. We've been working with that district for quite some time, and honored to have you both here. I've asked both Wes and Elisa to give an introduction to their districts and their context. And so, Wes, I'm going to turn it to you. You've got a couple of slides, and you're going to tell us about the story of Newport-Mesa.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Let me first just thank everybody for the hosts for bringing us together in this important conversation. They're friends and allies beyond just being our hosts. And to all of you showing up today intentionally, thanks for being here. As you mentioned, it's the Newport-Mesa Unified School District serving Newport Beach and Costa Mesa, California. And unified is a type of district, but for us, it's a theme. How do we unify two very different communities? We have 33 schools in our district between the two communities, about 17,700 students, almost 18,000 students, and 10,000, almost 11,000 of them are unduplicated students, right? 56% of our students are unduplicated. We have 2,800 English language learners. We are a community-funded district, which means that our property taxes exceed what the state is required to give us for funding. And when most people hear community-funded, or what you could call basic aid, they just assume, hey, everybody in that district must live on the beach. What's interesting is when you look at those demographics and add this to it, that we have more Title I schools and more Title I students than any other community-funded district in the state of California. So we've got this dichotomy, if you will, of the haves and have-nots, with an obligation to meet the needs of every single student in this district. We talk about equity here. We talk about meeting the needs of every student, giving every student what they need, when they need it, where they need it. And that's our commitment. Looking at our district, it shouldn't surprise people. We have 22 elementary schools. Given that we have two communities, guess how many Title I schools we have in elementary? 10 of 22. So again, the district is really kind of divided, and that's why this program is so important to us. This movement really is more than a program. It's a commitment and a passion project for us here. And we do it differently. We have schools where we have staff only. We've got schools where we have subcontracted companies that do the work. We do it before school in one instance, and then we do it over summer school. And I think what's interesting is my first superintendency, I had 1,400 kids in my district total, right? We have over 2,000 students in our ELO-P program and about to say, or almost 2,000 during the year. And we have the same amount during the summer, right? So the more kids during expanded learning that I had in my whole district, that's a commitment we have. We have some glimmers and reflections, but Michael, I think we'll save some of those for our conversation later on, but that's a glimpse of Newport-Mesa unified. And again, let me end where I began and just thank our allies and friends and all of you on the Zoom.
Thank you, Wes. You've been a leader in California for quite some time. I mean, most people on the Zoom know that you were the executive director, I think that was your title, of the Association of California School Administrators for years and years. And so it's great to see you back on frontline leadership and to be able to work together with you in that setting. Elisa, coming from Calexico, and you've got your own story. You've got a great story of your community. I've had the opportunity to be in your town, in your district, with, of course, our infamous Region 9 expanded learning CDE staff person, Mr. Fred Buggs, who's here in the Zoom. So, Elisa, introduce us to Calexico.
Thank you. Appreciate being here with all of you and having this opportunity. Our town is Calexico. Calexico is a border town to a capital of a state in Mexico. So Calexico is home for 38,496 residents. It's not a big city or town, but it is one of the most economically disadvantaged regions in California. We are rural, desert city, and we're bordered to Mexicali, Mexico. So the sister city of us has a population of 1.17 million, might have grown already. And it is the capital, like I said, of Baja California. Calexico Unified serves a little bit over 8,300 students. We've declined over 1,000 students in enrollment in the past 3 years. At some point, we were steady at 9,200. And so it's been really hard on us. It's a generational thing, it's less babies coming in kindergarten. But we do have pre-K to 12th grade. We do have one state preschool and one of our elementaries. We have a traditional high school, one continuation high school, 2 junior high, 7 elementaries, a community day school, and an independent study program. Next slide. So our unduplicated count is 91.43%. It is super high. It's almost every child qualifies for one demographic or the other. Over 86% of our students classify as socioeconomic disadvantage. At some point, Calexico had the highest unemployment rate in California. We tend to be always in the top 5%. Even our pregnancy rates are also up high. We tend to be one of the top also in California. 61.9% of our English learners that we have are Spanish speaking, almost 100%. So we usually just work with one language. So that's kind of unique. And we do have the highest EL population in California. We have 0.3% of our students are foster youth. And you can see other groups that we have. We have our homeless, our migrant population that tends to be a little bit higher too. Our students with disabilities is almost 10%. And our students that are Hispano or Latino are a little bit over 98%. All of our schools are Title I. So we qualify for anything that goes out there in terms of grant, and we seize and we take advantage. It's a lot of work but it's money for our kids. It's to improve our student services. And I have a great staff that works to make sure that we keep these kids safe, because Calexico also has a lot of safety concerns. And one of the top one is that we are one of the top 3 drug trafficking corridors in the USA. We're a border town, and this is both drug and human trafficking. So we want to keep our kids safe. We want to keep them engaged. And so that is our community.
Thank you, Elisa. You can tell we've got 2 very different districts, and that was by design and by intent. Because as we dig into the conversation, you'll see how the expanded learning is a critical strategy for all kids, for every community. And that was one of the specific designs of the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, is the administration and the legislature said, we want this program to be universal for all kids. And we'll get into those stories. So up on the screen, you see the Transforming Schools graphic. You've probably seen it many times. It's the state superintendent's, Tony Thurman's, holistic vision of what it means. And I put this up today to say that it's not uncommon for local educational agencies to hire someone to be in charge of each one of those graphics on the circle, and for someone to implement those types of things. And for many, expanded learning is seen as one of many programs. And for those of us who've been in the work, and for me, it's over 3 decades, almost 35 years, expanded learning isn't a program. It's a belief. It's an approach. It is a way of being with children. And if I was to change one thing about this graphic, I would actually not have a school in the middle. I'd have a child and a family and a community in the middle, because we often use the term whole child a little bit casually. It's not a casual thing to really see and know children. And that's what the beauty of expanded learning is that so many of our staff come from the community that they serve, and they know the families, and to know and see children is essential. And so when we say expanded learning programs, I wish we would say expanded learning strategy or expanded opportunities. This is not a program. It's a way of interacting with children to see their strengths, as Tiffany opened us up with. So with that in mind, now we're going to go dive back deep into expanded learning. And we've invited Hedy Chang. Hedy Chang is a person who's invited to speak all over the country, everywhere. She is known as the national expert on chronic absenteeism. And Hedy, would you please introduce your work to us and tell us how it relates to expanded learning?
Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate being here and with all of you, and even in the opening comments about how expanded learning, we need to think about it as a strategy and approach. And in my view, it's about really thinking about how do we create multiple learning opportunities for kids to enhance and expand and make sure that kids are getting all opportunities both outside and inside classrooms. And so I'm executive director, founder of Attendance Works. We're actually based here in California. I live in San Francisco, but I do work across the country, and California is where we've done our deepest work. And I want to talk about the critical importance of expanded learning, because right now we are facing a true crisis, which is reflected in this metric that we helped to create for the country called chronic absence, which is one that is used here. We can get this data in California. And when I talk about chronic absence, it's missing 10% or more of a school for any reason. That's excused, unexcused suspensions. And we actually designed this to be a metric so that it's an early warning sign that things are amiss, and we actually need to invest in more outreach engagement like expanded learning in order to address it. This is different from truancy, different from average daily attendance. This is a metric that we started in California looking at in about 16, 17, and now we're still looking at it. And if you go to the next slide, what you can see in California is that for the past, over the course of this pandemic, we had what was a significant and substantial challenge around chronic absence turn into an absolute crisis. So if you look at this, this is the data for 21-22, So not this past year, but the year before, and it showed that chronic absence more than doubled. And if you look at like what's happening with our youngest learners, from 15 to 40% of our kindergartners. But if you look at what's happening, the extraordinary rates, it's now about 30% statewide. And I actually have to admit that I'm a little bit worried at our high school grades, where we tend to count kids as being there if they're just there one period. We're actually missing out on how many kids have missed such 10% or more school. And missing 10% or more school is actually associated with not reading by the end of third grade, suspensions and not achieving in middle school, and not graduating from high school. And this is an early warning metric that we have to deepen our engagement. And in fact, data from 22-23, there's a little bit that's available, has suggested that chronic absence this immediate past year is not all that much better than 21-22. And this means that if we want this to get better, it requires really intentional strategies. And if you go to the next slide, and we think about being in school as really ensuring an equal opportunity to learn, we have to use our data to think about where do we need to most think and tailor our strategies to ensure that equal opportunity to learn. And there's two ways of looking at this. One is looking at the groups who are disproportionately affected by chronic absence. Our African-American kids, 42%, our Native American kids who have had the highest levels, but also our Latino and our Pacific Islander students. But then we also have to look at where the largest numbers, and almost 2/3 of the chronically absent kids in California are Hispanic or Latino. But there's also a substantial number of white kids, and still our African-American kids fall into large numbers. We want to think about, if we want to create opportunity and we want to tailor our strategies, we need to know who these kids are. And if you go to the next slide, what you want to think about is when you see such high levels of chronic absence, it's really a reflection that we've had a deep erosion in the positive conditions for learning. We know kids come to school when they feel physically, emotionally healthy and safe, when they feel a sense of belonging, connection, support, when they feel academic challenge and engagement, and when they're surrounded by adults and students who have the well-being so they can invest in those relationships. And changing these high levels requires a reinvestment and in these positive conditions for learning. And if you go to the next slide, that's really about putting in a tiered support system that starts with those positive conditions of learning, so kids feel school's a place they want to be. And then you're doing tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 interventions. And expanded learning is a critical component of that tiered approach. If you go to the next slide, what you really can hopefully see is that when kids have missed a lot of school, and we're seeing patterns of chronic absence, where kids are chronically absent over the course of a couple, even years right now, they need to have deepened engagement in learning. If those students and families who are struggling with attendance and engagement more than ever need a connection to a caring adult, they have to experience the joy of learning, feel that learning is fun. One of the challenges, they've missed so much school that now they don't feel confident about learning and their own ability to learn. They need more time in enriching environments that support socialization and connections to peers because they lost those connections. They need to be able to help us understand what are the barriers and what are the solutions, what motivates them to show up to school, and they need this support over time. They've had multiple years of disrupted learning. Our students, our children have had multiple years of disrupted learning. Re-engaging them, helping them feel connected, part of a larger community, is not an overnight endeavor. It requires us working together, and expanded learning together with schools are an incredible resource for doing that. And if you go to the next slide, so here's some things that you can do. You can think about, I want to use chronic absence data to figure out which schools, because you usually create expanded learning programs connected to schools, most need summer learning and after school programming, right? But then within those schools, you can think about, I want to prioritize students. So one of the things that, and my kids were in expanded learning programs in San Francisco. That's partly how I know Michael. But one of the things that I used to see is that the kids who got into expanded learning programs weren't necessarily always the kids who needed it the most. It's kind of first come, first serve. And often the families who are best able to get their kids into expanded learning programs are the ones that are a little better equipped, have jobs that give them flexibility. They can go searching around to figure out and get their kids onto the list and register them in time. If we know which groups would benefit most from expanded learning, then we need to target that outreach. We need to make sure they can get in, make sure that they have an easy time getting in. And then we can also talk to those kids because they'll give us insights. What do we need to do? And sometimes one of the benefits of expanded learning is because you have more freedom and flexibility. You can find out, well, what kinds of enrichment would make you want to come? What makes you enjoy being in school? And then we could also find out, because expanded learning, so in my experience, when my kids were in expanded learning, I was too busy to talk to the teacher when I came to school. It was an expanded learning when you kind of, now you can take a moment to talk to this person who's been taking care of your kids, and they could find out more from you. What are the challenges if you weren't able to get to school for a couple days? What are the issues you face? How could you help it? And then we can use our data, both the data that expanded learning programs take every time. Did the kids show up to the program? And by sharing information from schools to expanded learning programs to figure out who needs some more support. And you can use it to say, well, what are the things we're doing that might be working? Oh, when we do these enrichment clubs, more kids showed up. That's something we should do more of. When the winter bad days come, kids are having trouble getting there. Well, that maybe we need to make sure we provide rain gear. It's that information that then you can engage in continuous improvement together as a school community, including your expanded learning program, which often hires folks who are more likely to reflect the language and the culture of the kids in the communities who they're serving. And so we'll have even more insights to offer. So hopefully, Michael, that helps to lay the framework of how expanded learning can play such a crucial and critical role in helping our students learn and thrive, especially after the challenging conditions we faced over the last several years.
Hedy, always powerful. And I want to put everything you just said in a bottle, and I want to package it up and send it to every educator in California. You know, there's a reason expanded learning, and you mentioned it many times, but you talk about the positive conditions necessary at a school climate, you know, going back decades. And I feel like I'm going to channel Jeff Davis here talking about Bonnie Bernard, but there is a field called positive youth development. It is a field of study. It is an approach. And for those of us who got into after-school programs or summer programs in the 90s, we were actually evaluated on how does your program reflect the aspects and the critical features of a good, high-quality, positive youth development program. And it was about caring adult relationships, emotional and physical safety, opportunities for engagement. It's just all the things that you mentioned in your positive climate. And so thank you. And now it's time to launch into a discussion. Tiffany, I'm going to invite you to guide us in a bit of discussion with our educational leaders here.
I don't even know if guiding is the right word, right? I think Hedy always creates real opportunities for people to learn and think differently, right? About chronic absenteeism is not the symptom, right? It's the result of all of these other things that are happening with our young people and their families. And I think what's so interesting about kind of the conversation that I want us to have is that's one big picture issue that we know our schools are facing, right? And there are so many others, but it's like, how do we look and thinking about how you showed the superintendent's wheel, right? How do we not one-off these kinds of conversations? And how do we really think comprehensively about how do we really leverage funds like ELO-P, because I think it's such, the flexibility that we have with ELO-P has just not been seen before. And the fact that the target is explicitly unduplicated young people. How do we really leverage this kind of, this money to think differently about how we support our kids and our families? So I think I just want to start with just Elisa and Wes, like, what's your first kind of gut reaction to what Hedy shared, which I'm sure you've all heard before?
If I may, just as I mentioned, we're high in everything in California. We're chronically absenteeism in our city is 58.6%. So we're way above the state. And so we know we need to serve our students because of the community we live in. And it's a beautiful community. I've been in this district for 31 years, and I will not leave this district, you know, and I am an immigrant. I was born in my border town, Mexicali, but I've stayed here because I know the need for our students, and I know that we need to support our families to leave that cycle of oppression. And when I see my students, it's a reflection of who I was as a student. And so when we got, I mean, I'm what I mean is like, I'm an English learner. I'm a migrant student. I was high poverty. One of my father died very young. Mom was a single mom. She would leave to work at 5 a.m. We had to wake up by ourselves, had to go get back home. No after school programs back in our day. So then we went home and we had to cook. And it's just unbelievable what we had to do as children. We were 9 years old and I had 2 siblings below me. And so when all this money comes in for expanded learning, the first thing we thought is we need to restructure our staffing. One person can't handle it. And so that was our very first thing is we have all this money, we have all these ideas, we have all these great things to do. So we started by making our expanded learning coordinator into a director to give them the ability to bring all this staff. Because what we want is that we don't want any of our students to be on a wait list. We want to give this opportunity to every one of our students. And all of them have different needs. And we wanted to make sure that we created an affiliation for these students so that they want to come to school. And so that's the way we saw it. It's like a great opportunity that I didn't think was difficult because we have people in our staff that were born, raised, graduated from our high school and came back or stayed in our community. So we know our students and we know that we could not let go of all this grant funding that's coming in for our children.
And just to add, that director who came up through the expanded learning ranks, as a who we love, but I think it's such a great example of showing how a lot of districts had kind of struggled with who to support leading this kind of work. And the fact that you all really got someone that came through the expanded learning ranks and understood kind of the possibility there was really incredible. And just the opportunities and the flexibility of programming that you're offered, yoga for the babies, high school internship kind of programs, just you all have done some really incredible stuff with your funding. Wes, what about you? What first came to mind for Hedy's presentation?
Oh man, the first thing was we make education way too hard, right? I mean, think about it. If kids are engaged, they have enrichment opportunities and they feel joy, they have a positive connection with adults, they learn, they show up, right? That's what it's about. That's the key. And, you know, as I think about that in context of this conversation, Michael and the team, when they first came out to our district more than a year ago, made this great distinction, which is ELO-P is not an add-on. It's not something else. It's an extension of what we do, right? It's a continuum of learning and support and enrichment and engagement and pro-social relationship with adults for school until the students go home and everything in between. And so I think one of the things that comes to mind for me is we have to make sure that these are articulated so they support one another. And I think that's one of those reflections. How do we ensure there's articulation? When I was going through our ELO-P program at the end of the year, was watching before the final days, students in their enrichment programs doing Lego robotics. I'll tell you what, every kid was engaged. I didn't see, and I'm not just saying this, I didn't see one student not engaged with those Legos with the robotics, right? Now, if that's not happening earlier in the day, from first bell to dismissal bell, then what are we missing, right? Maybe that's affecting kids, showing up. Someone put in the chat, STEAM, universal STEAM, amen, right? These are things that kids are interested in. They're going to prepare them for the jobs that haven't been created yet. But I saw the same thing in the arts that we do. Our ELO programs are rich in the arts. We had Annie Jr. as the capstone for most of our ELO-P programs at our sites. Now I saw a bunch of different Annies who look different, even different genders. I saw different peppers. I heard different voices, right? Across the spectrum. So I'll tell you what I saw in every single instance. I saw a kid enjoying what they were doing, and I saw parents smiling. Now, if we don't have that first bell to dismissal bell, then shame on us once again that we're not articulating these programs so the kids are engaged and enriched and they want to come to school. And so here is the opportunity, right, to make sure this is truly an expansion of learning. And I just want to say to the before school part, one of our neediest schools, when I first got to the district, the parents struggled to get their kids to school because it's a tough part of town. There's a lot of commerce and business and trucks, and we didn't have a bus route there, and not large sidewalks. In some areas, no sidewalks. So in my first 2 weeks, we created a bus route to help kids get to school. But then parents said, we go to work early. Both of us have to go to work really early. We're up well before the sun rises, and we can't get our kids to school that early. Even with the bus, can you help us? So by expanding to before school at that school, we saw attendance increase. We saw students show up engaged. And that's been a game changer for us. And so this context of, it is the expansion of learning that could be before the first bell. It certainly can be after the first bell. It's everything in between. And they have to articulate and inform one another. And I'll just say one of the things that I think is important about this articulation and showing up. All of our kids in certain schools show up hungry, right, in our district. And they get nutrition breaks. And I asked folks in the ELO-P, I said, how many kids are taking part of the nutrition break? And they looked at me like I was crazy. Now, truth be told, I am, right? I mean, I got all kinds of things that haven't been diagnosed. But I said, what's up? And they're like, every kid. In fact, kids take stuff home, right? They'll say, can I take some home to my brother, my sister, whomever, right? Well, what are we doing during the day, traditional day, to address that need also? I just wanted to Hedy say, here's an interesting thing for you to think about as you do this work, because I don't disagree with anything you've said. Again, we have two communities like I established at the beginning, setting it up for the district. I got folks in a certain part of town where if I try to tell them why it's important for their kid to be at school, they look at me and say, really? I could take my kid to Europe for a month. That kid's still going to Harvard, right? My kid can roll out of bed without any practice and get 100% on any of the standardized tests they're taking. They will get top score in all their AP classes without ever coming to one of your classrooms. So we have to think here, and that's why we have a show up. 90% of success is showing up. So we have a show up plan, right? That looks different in different places. And we share with those folks because our education establishment is a community. And that community is enriched when you're there. When you don't show up, it deteriorates the quality of that community. So we need you there. The community needs you there because otherwise they've got a good argument. So thinking about chronic absenteeism and showing up looks different in different places. That's how we're trying to process that, Hedy.
Yeah, can I respond to that? So I totally, absolutely agree. And I think it's really interesting, these two different situations we have here. One where it's almost the entire community and one where you've got and I live in San Francisco, Wesley, so I'm a Dr. Smith, so I get this issue of haves and have-nots in the same community. Couple things. One is, I do want to call attention that chronic absence does affect affluent and lower income kids differently. because affluent families have more resources to make up for some of the lost instructional time. Whereas lower income families who may not have a whole lot of books at home, don't have the money to buy even the Legos at home, maybe, they are, and kids who are lower income without those resources actually grow faster when they're in enriching environments, but they also lose more when they can't make up for that time. And one of the scary things I'm seeing from national data that we're just starting to analyze is that communities with more than 75% of their kids in poverty, and you have sort of part of your communities like that. You're not evenly spread. Your poverty isn't spread evenly across, Newport-Mesa. It's in some schools, and then Elisa, you're having it across all of your schools. Those communities, and this is why, Michael, your point of the transformational approach need a lot more. Because those communities often also are the ones that were hardest hit by the pandemic. They had more COVID deaths, they had more trauma, you have more transportation issues. And hearing from those communities and figuring out, do you need an extra bus is true. At the same time, we have to create this norm of showing up every day for everyone. And I also believe, I actually think.
Hedy, you muted yourself.
I also think more affluent kids pay some consequences as well. We lose out as a community, but I do think, so we actually have also a Showing Up Matters for Real toolkit that I just stuck in, because when you are in a regular routine of attendance, it actually helps dealing with chaotic transitions. We are hearing about anxiety from so many kids, and that's an affluent kid issue, not just a low income issue. How do you deal with anxiety is you stay in a regular routine. It's important. Making sure that you connect to peers and learn how to connect to kids who are different from yourself. That will be a skill that you need to have all your life. I don't care what job you have. That's about engagement. And it's at schools where you forge those relationships. And then there is this issue of access to resources, which may be more important for some kids, but enrichment activities are another kind of access to resources. And then there's also about learning. So we actually do have to broaden how we talk about why missing school has consequences and why showing up matters so very much.
And I'm gonna add, right? And I think I want Elisa to comment, because I'm looking, we've really paid attention to some of the amazing work that you all are doing and how diverse the way that you've used these dollars, right? But I'm really thinking there's another piece about showing up and attendance that's critical, is helping young people understand the relevance of the education they are there to get. And I think we have to do a better job of that part. And we talked to some districts who are very clear, right? Like, everybody has the structure that they have to do from bell to bell, right? There are certain very specific things. But what we've been saying to schools is, but if you didn't have to do those things just because you have to, not because they are proving to show that's what's best for kids in the moment, how do you leverage your expanded learning time to expand those opportunities, right? While you get, because I really believe this, our K-12 traditional comprehensive day has to catch up to where our children and families and communities are and the needs that we have right now. People worked really hard during the pandemic to meet the needs of families and communities where they were, right? Things shifted immediately. 10 business days, our entire system said, we won't do those things we said, we'll do what people need. And our schools showed up as the actual hubs that they are intended to be. And now we're trying to go back, right? And so we're struggling with that. But I think, like, Elisa, what are some of the examples of some of the programs that you all are doing? Like, I mentioned a little bit that high school program that had a mix of AP students and continuing ed students all learning how to come in and work collectively and support the expanded learning programs. Just brilliant examples of how to build community across those artificial lines that we've allowed, like money, to create structures between our young people. What say you, Elisa?
So actually, I wanted to share that we don't have a shortage of teachers here, because we have been able to create sort of a pipeline through our different programs, through our tutors, instructional aides, and we have San Diego State, the Imperial Valley campus here, and we have the top Ivy community college. Imperial Valley College just got the Aspen Award. And so one of the new programs, again, that our director brought in is the student wellness. So we're bringing students that are juniors and seniors, and we're trying to target unduplicated pupils as well as athletes and ASB students. And they go through a semester of training. Every week, religiously, they have a topic, and a lot of it is about how do you fill out an application? How do you do a resume? How do you interview? So they do mock interviews. And so the second semester, because they have to be 16 years old for their permits, the second semester, we are now paying them to come and work for us while they're at school, but they're working for us in the after-school program. And so they get to experience supporting children. And so that's how they say, you know what, I think this is something I want to do for the future. I want to become a teacher and I want to stay in this community. And that's what we want. We want our own students to be successful and to be able to stay with us. And so the trainings that they get through the program that we offer is amazing. It's just amazing. We also have an athletics program. Not all our kids are going to be able to play sports at the junior high school levels. So this year we're implementing a brand new intramural program. We're gonna have to find an athletic director because it is huge to get 7 elementaries and to coordinate and do flag football and soccer. So that's something new that's coming up this year. In terms of Tier 1 instruction, we've been working through another presenter and another consultant trying to improve our Tier 1 instruction and doing more truly differentiated assistance. But our director's involved too. So whatever we do in a regular school day, our director's involved. And so our plan is that within 3 years from now, the after-school program is going to tie directly to our students' academic needs because they'll have the data that tells them student A is lacking in this skill in math or in ELA. So now we can service them in a differentiation setting also in our after-school program. So we're building, we're building something that it'll take us about 3 to 4 years, but it's been working for us. Our current employees, they were part-time, temporary, under contract. We just made them now permanent employees, and they have benefits. They now have benefits, and again, we want to keep our workers that we're training, they're doing all this amazing work, and we're investing so that they stay in our community and they're going to be role models for our children.
Thank you, Elisa. Michael, what you thinking about up there?
I just love this. Just the examples are recognizing that the schools are actually part of communities. And like so many times when we talk about community schools, we're talking about a program to bring more resources from the community into the school, but you're both talking about and acknowledging that your schools are in communities and the health of the community impacts the well-being of the students at the school. And so again, it's like going back to that wheel. It's like expanded learning, community schools, nutritious food, serving the young kids in transitional kindergarten. It's this notion that this way of seeing whole communities, whole families, and the connections between. So I love what I'm hearing. And I know that I'm also thinking about, just yesterday, I heard about a district who had a belief that the prior after-school funding, the ACES program or the 21st century, had to be separate from ELO-P. And specifically said, we cannot allow money from ELO-P to support people involved in the ACES program. And I'm so frustrated by this misinformation that gets out there because, Elisa, what you just said about we're taking our people that used to be part-time contracted and making them full-time with benefits. That's exactly the vision of this. Because if we don't invest in our humans that are supporting the children, mean, this is not the positive conditions that our children need are also the positive conditions that our staff need and the adults need. And we have an opportunity now to do things right. And what I see across California are district leaders who somehow are letting artificial dividers come into place because, and I should say somehow we're seeing this, we have trained our educational leaders to keep things separate, keep things in silos, track things differently. And in fact, we've slapped your hands if you didn't. And now we're saying, no, this is flexible. This is this. And I saw a comment in the chat. It's kind of hard because this is so flexible. We're not used to this. I'm wondering, Wes and Elisa, if you can just think to that mindset of thinking creatively and holistically about your resources and not in separate categories.
So I just like to share that I'm also the writer of the LCAP for our district, and I do all the educational partner stakeholder meetings and feedback, and my ed services team is heavily involved too, because I think what's key here is communication. So is our superintendent. We have cabinet meetings every other week, and he gives an opportunity to share what's going on around our schools, because we have to merge ourselves. You know, everybody needs to know what's happening and no longer work in isolation, because if we didn't do this, then we wouldn't be able to support each other in everything that our child needs. We're in the implementation plannings of the community schools. We're planning for 5 schools to begin with. That's something else that we're working on. We're doing attendance campaigns, working with Attendance Works for our, bringing PBIS district-wide. So it's just a lot of work that's taking place. But if we don't align our plans, like everything has to tie back to our LCAP. Our LCAP has actions that says in conjunction with expanded learning, because we even not multi-fund, but we co-fund activities. Like if we want to bring a gym for our students at our junior high, we're going to take a classroom, we're going to convert it to a gym, and we co-fund it. After school program puts in a chunk of the money, we put a chunk of the money, we use it during the day, they use it after school. So we do that a lot. Or we purchase a portable. During the day, it's used for band and the arts, and then after school comes in, and then they take it after school. So we are doing a lot of that, because it really is an extension of what we're doing during the day. So that's how we see it. It's like a big picture. It's like our district is a community school.
Yeah, I would just add that that's our passion, right? To take all of the available resources and align them with our greatest needs, right? That's the call. And we have some great opportunities here, which I feel is a blessing. I've got a school that has one fundraiser. They have more, but in one fundraiser, they raised $300,000 for their foundation. Think about what they can expand and engage and enrich at that school. I've got other schools that can't raise $10,000 in a year. So there is this disparity of access and opportunity. But here's the beautiful part. Those folks from that foundation have said, can we come together and figure out, is there a way to do something together, right? Where we all do some fundraising, and a portion of that goes to those who need more support. And how beautiful is that? Because that was our idea at the district office anyway. But they brought it up, right? They brought it up. So we're looking at things like that. We have a gentleman that started Maui and Sons Clothing here. One of my colleagues on the Zoom reminded me of this, and he wants to do this project where they take unused, old material, recycled material. He has a cool term for it, but I'm not cool, so I don't know it. And they're creating new clothes. They have this club where kids are learning how to fabricate and design. And they got a pop-up store and they sell out within a half hour. We're thinking about opening this up as maybe even an ELO-P program, right? Where we're doing fabrication, we're doing design. And we got this person who was a part of Maui and Sons and Quicksilver and doesn't get anything out of it. All the money goes back into the school district pot. How about using that to expand learning in places where they need fabric to clothe their body. You know what I mean? So we're excited about that. And I gotta, because I think we're running short on time. I would be remiss if I didn't say Michael and the team, Tiffany and Heather and Fred, they helped us dream, right? And that's for me what Michael's question was about. Because when they came to us, they said, don't ask us about compliance. Don't ask us about rules. Tell us your dream. Now, that's the first time I've ever heard someone at CDE say that. I think typically in my career, and I've had a long career, we've seen CDE as a compliance function, which is fine. There has to be compliance. Nothing wrong with that. But Michael and the team, Tiffany, Heather, Fred, you've shifted it. Now for me, CDE is a dreaming function. Help us dream in the state of California. You've done that in Newport-Mesa. So we're going to continue to dream and get creative and try to make a difference for all of our students.
Can I say one thing to connect on this? Oh, sorry. You know, Bob Balvin's talked about school connectedness as the key to kids showing up and doing well. And school connectedness is, you know, you got a caring adult. You have peers that you connect to. You feel like when you walk on a school campus, you're welcome and you are engaged in some kind of pro-social activity. And if we made sure every kid had one of those, you would dramatically improve that sense of belonging, connection, and how schools feel for kids. And I just can't have to say, you know, when you were talking, both Elisa, your investment in the people, the adults, and making sure they're feeling that who kids can connect to. And then Wesley talking about, you know, like the kinds of clubs that are those pro-social activities that make you feel connected. You know, that doesn't feel like that big of a lift for expanded learnings to achieve, programs to achieve.
Elisa?
Just to add to that, I know we had our partners here visiting us one day. Our kids have absolutely nothing in our community. We don't have a YMCA. We don't have anything. I mean, if anything, we have parent volunteers that do a soccer league here with us. We don't even have our football PAL program anymore. So there's really nothing to do out there. And we've had students that have been recruited as mules to pass drugs because there's nothing else to do, right? So they were here visiting, and our kids are not exposed to any extracurricular activities, not even to dance classes, because they cannot afford it. And we were actually walking around and we went to see some of our little ones do ballet, and we were looking at them. And then after a while, we looked at each other. You can feel like we had tears, you know, just to see that these kids are getting exposed to something that more than likely they would never have had in their lifetime. Because I never had it, right? And I go like, I can't imagine that we're bringing these things to our children, and we provide everything, the little tutus and the little shoes and everything. And so for me, it just reminds me of why we do what we do.
You know, Tiffany, we picked the right people.
Without a doubt.
We picked the right people. I heard a phrase the other day that has stuck with me. When your heart speaks, take good notes. And we've heard from people's hearts today. So I hope everyone's taking good notes. And Wes, I might need to retire now that you've said CDE is the dreaming function. You know, that's a good point. That's a good note to end on. Tiffany.
Hey, we can't have you retire, man. We can't have you retire. If you're going to retire, I take it back. I redact it right now if you're retiring.
Oh, I'm not retiring anytime soon. Don't worry. So I guess that's our time, Tiffany, right?
Yeah. You all, sincerely, thank you. I
Thank
think what we really wanted people to get from this conversation is that there's always larger strategy in play that we need to be mindful of. And this is one funding stream, but it's the one that we feel like is a good leverage point for really creating the kinds of schools and the communities and supporting staff in ways that we feel like can change our school community. So thank you. Melissa, I'm passing back to you to get us into some smaller conversation spaces. And thanks
Thank
again,
you.
y'all.
Thank you, Tiff. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Dr. Wesley Smith. Thank you, Elisa Ramirez and Thank you to Hedy Chang for an awesome discussion and conversation about how ELO-P and all of the great opportunities that we have in our communities are opportunities to dream for young people. So thank you. Thank you also to all of our participants who participated in day 1, 2, 3, and or today, day 4. These academies that are designed by a team, a small team of us, are really intended to support all of our state leaders and community educators and folks doing the work to support young people. So thank you all for engaging in our ELO-P Academy this fall. So I am excited to, before I do that, we're going to open up breakout rooms in a moment. But before that, today is the last day of the Academy, as I mentioned earlier, and your feedback is essential in our continuous quality improvement process, our CQI process. So we'll drop a link in the chat in a moment to complete our feedback form and also connect with your system of support for expanded learning. The SSEL is a resourceful group of folks who are here to support everyone. And so we'll also drop that link in the chat, or you can scan the QR code here for our system of support for expanded learning. Whoopsie, and my mouse just went a little crazy. I think it's excited to engage in breakouts. I mentioned earlier our feedback form, so the link is here. You can also scan the QR code, and we'll drop all of these links in the chat for you all. All right, so we are going to open up our